What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader, and I am back with another video. I want to talk today about shill bidding. And I mentioned this in my certified link kind of price update, market update, what happened in those auctions, and how some big auction houses that have been caught shill bidding. So we're going to talk about what it is, what eBay's policy is, and I'm not accusing this seller of anything, but I wanted to at least point out some very interesting data, and I'll let you guys make your own decisions on this. And then I'll at the end, I'll kind of give you my personal policy on how to deal with auctions where there's an item that you want and you're just worried about shill bidding. That's just kind of my own personal takeaway. I can promise you that if you bought a lot of items on eBay, Heritage, some of these other big auction houses, Comic Link, I would imagine that in some form or fashion, unbeknownst to the auction houses sometimes with the auction houses actually involved, and I'm not going to say who they are, but they've been caught in the past shill bidding to drive up the prices, the inflate prices of graded video games and other things. But I can promise you that if you've been buying any of these kind of collectibles over the last however long, 10 or 15 years, at some point you've probably bid on or won an item that has been shill bid where the price has been inflated. So I think it's important to at least recognize that it's out there. I don't know how prevalent it is, but it does happen. And it's important to have all the information in front of you. The whole point of this channel, really, if we really boil it down, the whole point of this channel is to make you guys as collectors better informed to make good decisions with your money as to what you spend it on and how much you spend it on and get the most for your money, right? So at least be aware that shill bidding is out there and that you need to be prepared for it and what to do about it. So first of all, let's go to eBay. eBay, under the customer service, they say that here's their shill bidding policy. Shill bidding is when someone bids on an item to artificially increase its price, desirability, or search standing. So that's the general definition. And how that takes place is if I have an item on eBay that's at auction, I could get multiple friends who I can say, hey, do you mind bidding on my item to kind of drive the price up a little bit? I've seen sellers themselves get their friends, to do it. I've seen sellers create alternate accounts, maybe log in from a different IP address, things like that. So auction houses can sometimes be accused of doing it, where if someone puts in a really high bid early on, and the auction house is aware of that, maybe they go ahead and bid it up a little bit to make sure that it gets pretty close to that auction price that someone has already inputted early on in the auction. And I know somebody who fell prey to that. They accidentally put in a really high bid on something early on a grade of a comic that they thought was a 9.8. It ended up being a 9.6. They were looking at it on their phone, blah, blah, blah. They accidentally inputted a big number. It was a 9.6. It was worth like half of what or a third of what they put in for their bid early on. And wouldn't you know it, that the auction ended and they won the item. And even though there have been nothing on Go Collect or GPA anywhere near that price, the final winning price that was pretty close to what he bid. So it makes you wonder, when a 9.6 graded comic sells for 5 or 6 times what it should because of an accidental early bid by somebody. I wonder how that happened. That kind of stuff, it just makes you raise your eyebrows. So that's what, broadly speaking, what shill bidding is. It's just a way to drive up the final auction winning price that some sellers, unscrupulous sellers use, or even auction houses can sometimes use. How do you report it? Well, if you think another member is shill bidding, you don't need to report it to us. eBay has a number of systems in place to detect and monitor bidding patterns and practices. If we identify any malicious behavior, we'll take steps to prevent it. And I call BS on that. I don't believe that. I'm sorry. I think that there's too many ways for people to get around this with having friends bid on it or having, alternate accounts set up from different IP addresses for them to be able to detect it properly. That's my personal opinion. I have no idea what systems in place that eBay has, but I just find it hard to believe that they detect and catch shill bidding with any regular occurrence. I bet they catch less than 10%. I bet it's even less than 5% of the shill bidding that actually takes place on eBay. So that's my personal opinion. Now, I want to show you some eBay auctions that ended a couple of days ago. And I'm going to preface this by saying that I have no idea if there is shill bidding involved, okay? I'm going to say that right now. That very well could be all legitimate bidding. Very much so. But I want to at least raise the awareness of the types of stuff that I see that at least raises my eyebrows and it makes you question what's going on. Okay, so a typical auction, now these are not every item that this seller had evidence of shill bidding. Okay, I want to say that as well. They had very kind of standard traditional auction process. And if you look at, for example, this Lily Letty that sold as of the making of this video last night, Wednesday evening, it was a minty looking Lily Letty Chewbacca complete with the correct blaster. And this is a seller that I've covered in the past on market updates in my loose complete videos. And it ended for $70.68. Probably about right, if not below fair market value for a minty Lily Letty complete Chewbacca. And if you look at the auction, if you go here on the main page here, under the final winning price, there's always a little thing that says 14 bids. And you can click on that for the bidding history. And this is what it takes you to. Here's the bid history for that Chewbacca that I just showed you. And if you look at all the bidders, that number in parentheses is past transactions, right? You can see all the completed transactions for whoever was bidding on this Chewbacca. They had 3,000, 1,400, 252, 500. So these are all legitimate bidders on this Chewbacca because they've had a large number of completed auctions under their bid history or their profile history. And we get feedback as both buyer and seller. And once you do that, then it goes to your feedback profile and it gets added to that number. So positive, negative, neutral feedback. And so all of these bidders on this Chewbacca have a previous bid history. So they're probably most likely 99.99% likely all legitimate bidders. Here's another one. This was a beautiful Regresso Luke Bespin Lily Letty, Dead Mint Grail. And it was in very nice shape, brown-haired, wide-handle blaster. It's absolutely the Lily Letty, and it's a gorgeous example of it. Now, this one sold for $517, which I would argue in the current market environment may be a little high, but in all fairness, it was in pretty good shape. You can see a little bit of wear to the back of the utility belt. So this is probably an 80 plus, I would guess. Maybe it gets an 85, but it's a very nice figure, okay? Got the correct accessories, wide-handle Bespin blaster, things like that. So beautiful example. Is it worth $517? Maybe to somebody it is who doesn't have it. To me, I think that's kind of high, but that's the number. So let's look at the bid history on that one. And again, if you look at all of the bidders on this Luke Bespin, they were all bidders that have a large number of of past transactions on their profiles. 1152, 120, 1152, 918, 1348. So these are all big boy bidders, people who have spent lots of money on eBay. 2,500 transactions, 2,700 transactions. So my gut says that final winning price of $517, that's legit. Somebody really wanted it and they were willing to pay that price for it. I don't even think it's that much of an overpay, to be honest with you. I was thinking like 400, 450-ish. So 517 is really not that much of an overpay. So pretty fair looking number there. Now we go to another grail that this seller had. This was a Burgundy Cape squid head. We all know how expensive this one can be. And this one was in pretty good shape. It wasn't perfect, but it was in pretty good shape. I would argue it probably grade about an 80 or an 80 plus, somewhere in that ballpark. It had some rub on the nose there, so maybe an 80 at best, if not lower. But again, it wasn't perfect. He didn't say it was perfect. He had lots of good detailed data. He showed all the photos in high res, all the accessories, very transparent with the condition of it. That one ended at 407. And I'm like, okay, that's probably about right. 407 is about right for that. I have a CAS 85 plus. I think I spent like $700 on mine, and that was a long time ago when the market was stronger. But 407 for that's probably about right. Let's take a look at the bid history on that one. Again, for the most, or all of them, they all have some sort of transaction history for all of these figures. For all these bids. 1,300, 187, 76. The lowest was 5, but, so what? We all start somewhere on eBay, right? At some point, all of us who have bid and bought on eBay, we've had 0 transactions, okay? So I'm not trying to say that anyone who has 0 past transactions is a fake bidder, because that's not always the case, right? But when you're buying big boy $400 items on eBay, it's probably not going to be your first transaction, okay? You know, so, and that proved to be the case with this one. And there was I didn't pull it up, but there was another one. There was a Lily Letty Luke Jedi that came complete with the card back and the bubble. Beautiful item, absolutely beautiful. I really wanted it. One of my Patreon supporters bought that. I checked out the bid history, all kosher, and it sold for like $576, I think, somewhere in that ballpark. So again, for a lot of these big boy items, you know, they were proven past bidders that are veterans of eBay, so to speak, in terms of buying on eBay. Now let's talk about some of these other items. Okay, so here was a Admiral Akbar Lily Letty. That one sold for $81. And again, none of these final prices, even after the kind of questionable bid histories, none of them were really outside of market value too much. Some of them, I would argue, maybe even on this one, was maybe a little low. You know, $81 for a complete Admiral Akbar, probably okay. This was probably in 80 grade condition at best. It had some rubs on the chest and on the hands and things like that. $81, probably about right for a 75 plus or an 80 grade. But if you look at the bid history on it, look at how many bids that this zero feedback buyer bid on it. You know, it was one particular buyer that had zero feedback, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80. So they bid it up from $30 all the way up to $80 for their first transaction. Again, it was a low value item. So, okay, all right. So that was one. And, you know, we don't know what their name is, but it's 2.6. Now let's go to an incomplete but pretty mint looking Lily Letty Leia Bespin. That one sold for $117.50. Again, probably about right for just the figure, if not even a little low. But if you could look at the bid history on this one, there were two different bidders that had zero feedback. I took it from $12 up to $25, and then there was another bidder, 6.8, took it from $90 to $102. So again, these could be bidders in Mexico or anywhere that are buying their first Lily Lettys, and they're really excited. But I do find it interesting that we've got now 3 different accounts that all have zero feedback that have bid on these Lily Letty auctions. That's 3 different accounts now. So keep that in mind. Lily Letty Emperor. This one sold for $96 complete, pretty mint looking, $96, good deal. I would actually argue that's probably a pretty fair price, even with taxes and shipping. Again, on this one, there was another bidder that bid that had zero feedback, and it was also a different account. 3.9, zero feedback on that one. Took it from $88 to $95. So I don't know, you know, it'd be one thing if it was going from $88 to $188. Then I might be a little questioning, because that's a big jump. We're not talking big jumps here. We're only talking $10, $20, but it's another zero feedback buyer that just happens to be on this exact same auction lot. That's 4 different accounts now that have zero feedback that have bought in this Lily Letty, or at least bid in this Lily Letty lot. And none of them won, by the way. You never see the zero feedback winners actually win. And when they do, it mysteriously gets relisted. And I'm not saying this seller did that, but I've seen other sellers on eBay where a zero feedback buyer wins the auction, and then lo and behold, 3 or 4 days later, it gets relisted. Huh, that's weird. Maybe the Shill bidder was trying to inflate the price and they accidentally won it. That happens quite a bit on eBay. Here was another one, a very fair price, $102.50 for a minty looking Lily Letty Hoth Rebel Commander. I paid about that price for mine, loose, ungraded, complete. I think I about even paid a little bit more, $110. So that one sold for $102.50. Again, going to the auction, there was one bidder, 0.2, and I've lost count now, but I think that's even a 5th or 6th different bidder with zero feedback on it. Again, here was a Lily Letty Leia in her Endor Combat Poncho. That one sold for $335 on Facebook, and some of the Lily Letty groups, they go for about $300 to $350. So again, you can't really say that they're inflating the prices all that much, because even fair market value for these are about $335. But at the same time, if I'm a bidder on this and all of a sudden it gets boosted higher than what I expected, it's not a good feeling, right? So here was another one in ... 6 was another one. There was another same bidder in ... 6. So another zero feedback buyer. I think that's either 6 or 7. I've lost count, as I said. Here was a weekway, $66. Another one, E.in, 0 feedback. Here was the one I was bidding on. So here was the one. So this is a Dead Mint Lily Letty Han Solo in trench coat. And this is one I don't have in my collection. I was planning on bidding on it. And it was, for the longest time, going for about $195. All of a sudden, it really jumped up to like $300 or so. And so let's look at the final winning bid was $451.50, which it was admittedly in very good shape. I would argue it probably would grade an 85 or an 85 plus. Probably an 85. It had one little, maybe an 85. Yeah, because it had a hand rub right there. But still, this is a pretty desirable variant and one I didn't have, and I wouldn't mind picking it up. You know, it wasn't perfect. It had some eyebrow rub, things like that. But I'm guessing 80 plus, 85, somewhere in there. $451.50 is a lot higher than I would be willing to pay, though. And again, the winning bidder was over 2,100 bids, so it is what it is. But you also notice that the bids went from $51 to $155, pretty big jump, to $170, to $190, and then all of a sudden to $255. So, and again, it was another 0 feedback bidder that did that. So I'm just saying, here's a Lily Letty Lando Bespin. It's one I already have. That sold for $280, which is high. That's very high to me. I mean, I think I paid $300 for my AFA 80 graded example. This one, again, had a 0 feedback bidder, 9.H. So, anyway, my only point is that, again, some of these, or a lot of these actually sold for at, or maybe slightly above, or even sometimes slightly below fair market value. But some, like the Letty trench coat, and I don't want it to make it sound like this is me being bitter for losing it, because I don't particularly care if I want it or not. All right, I've got enough toys. All right, I don't need to have it. I'm not being bitter here. But, you know, some of these went for a little bit higher than I expected, or what I would argue is fair market value. And if it quacks like a duck, if it feeds on aquatic marine life like a duck, if it has a pretty plume of feathers like a duck, it might be a duck, okay? So I've seen enough to where I'm probably not going to be bidding on this particular seller's auctions. I'll let you decide whether you think this is shill bidding or not. I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth or say that it's absolutely shill bidding, because there's no way to prove it, right? And that's the beauty of, if you're a seller that's willing to engage in shenanigans like this, there's no way to prove it. No way to prove it. But at the end of the day, the cynic in me says that, hey, if you're going to bid $450 anyway, let's say I valued this at $455. If you're going to bid at $450 anyway, $455 for it anyway, and you end up winning it, whether it's shill bidding or not, you're the one that hit the enter button on the bid, on place bid. So the buyer still has responsibility, whether there's shill bidding going on or not. Okay, the buyer, you still have responsibility, personal responsibility, knowing that. But I think from my perspective is that a lot of these items maybe would have, or probably would have, or potentially would have gone for lower than they would have if 0 feedback bidders proved to be shill bidders. Again, we have no way to prove it. So the item that I'd be willing to pay $455 for, if it sold for $300, I would be pretty happy as a buyer. So you just need to be aware, and you utilize that bid history button. If you're considering buying an item and you see a big jump on it, you might want to go check out the bid history, because you might get lots of interesting information where you see some 0 feedback bidders on it. And at the end of the day, you may not care. If it's something you really want, and it's something that you absolutely have to have, or you really want to have, and you're willing to pay the price, shill bidding or not, then so be it. I certainly have bought from sellers where I know that they've been caught for shill bidding before in the past. And the Facebook Star Wars groups, they do a pretty good job of regulating it. If they can prove that a seller on Facebook, a seller that engages in sales on eBay is also a member of the Facebook groups, and they can prove or have proof, definitive or fairly definitive proof, or have gotten an admittance of guilt from a particular member of that group that they have engaged in shill bidding, then they will get banned. And it's happened before. There's been a number of sellers on eBay that are members of the big Facebook groups, like whatever, Echo Base, Jabba's Palace, in any of the big groups out there, they get banned. And Rightly so, in my opinion. If you get caught, or if you get caught with pretty definitive proof, and when I say pretty, it's got to be pretty close to 99.9% definitive, in my opinion. Or they admit it, and some sellers do admit it. They come out and say, "Yeah, I did it. I'm sorry. Take mercy on me." Well, usually they don't. Usually they ban them. So, but utilize this bid history, because if there's something that you think where the price is kind of getting a little higher than you want to pay, or pretty close to the price you want to pay, and you happen to know some zero feedback bidders there, what I do is I just stay away. I'm like, okay. There's too many good sellers on eBay. There's too many good sellers on Facebook, quite honestly, to bother using eBay most of the time. But there's too many good sellers, period. And there's too much of this Star Wars stuff out there to put up with it. As I think it's Reserved Investments, as a YouTuber, as he likes to point out, these are unregulated markets. All right. When you're dealing with unregulated markets for these collectibles, this asset class, so to speak, there's going to be scumbags that come out of the woodwork. Whether it's the CGC scandals that are going on right now, whether it's shill bidding on eBay, or any of the big auction houses that have gotten caught, the inflated prices for WATA graded video games. If it's an unregulated market where there's no Securities and Exchange Commission overlooking what they're doing, they're going to find ways to scam. That's just the way it is. And you got to be prepared as a collector, and be prepared to deal with that, and have a plan in place as to how you're going to deal with that. Me, I usually just walk away. I just walk away and find a different seller. There's too much out there that I'd be willing to buy and collect, where I'm not going to deal with it. There were, even Comic Link, where I am a frequent customer, they had an Ultimate Fallout 4 first print, CGC 9.8, that sold in the last auction. It sold for like $3,500. The fair market value for one, even on eBay, is like $1,100 or $1,200. So somebody paid for an Ultimate Fallout 4 first print, which is the first appearance of Miles Morales, they paid 3 times market value in the last auction. That, to me, has to be shill bidding. There's just too much weird crap going on. Now, it's probably not Comic Link that's doing it, but whoever was the seller of that book, who had it consigned with Comic Link, they probably got their buddies to bid on it. And for some crazy reason, some idiot was willing to pay $3,500. I bet we'll probably see that one get relisted at some point. So, you could buy 3 of them, 3 CGC 9.8s for that book, for that price, not just one. So it doesn't matter the platform. There's weird shenanigans that happen on any platform. And some of it is most of it, I would argue, is probably not even aware that, the auction houses themselves are not even aware of it. Certainly the case at eBay. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at shill bidding, what it is, and some of the warning signs that are out there. And we also got to look at some closing prices for some Lily Lettys. So thanks as always for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like, and I'll be back soon.